Hi everyone, I'm Janet B, recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. Happy to be with you all this Thursday morning. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about steps 6 and 7. And since the AA Big Book just has a couple paragraphs on it, I'm going to dive into the AA 12 and 12. So if you have that book with you, I am on page 63, and I am going to start with a little prayer of my own. Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering us all here today. And please help me speak what you want me to speak, and please help people hear what you need them to hear. Amen. So on page 63, it starts, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character because they're assuming we're not necessarily ready just because we've done our fifth step, that there may be some blocks. So they talk a little bit about it. So in the first paragraph, they say, any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservation has come a long way spiritually and is and we can assume that person is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. So, a couple things here. It says we repeatedly try this. So, this isn't a one and done, right? When we do our nightly reviews, we look to see what we've done wrong, what we could have done better, what character defects were we exhibiting or indulging in during the day, and we ask God to remove them. So, y'all, that's part of our nightly review. It's not just list it all on an app, send it to someone, and be done. It's like, God, when I finish it, I do the 7-step prayer and I specifically ask for any defects I've been indulging in during the day to be removed. And isn't it so pretty how it says someone who does this is entitled to be called a man or a woman who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. So that's our goal, to grow in the image and likeness of our creator, in the image and likeness of God. So a really cool thing to do would be to go through the big book and see what are some characteristics of our creator. So I'll just list a couple. Page 56, infinite power and love. Page 14, the one who gives serenity, right? These are the attributes of God. And as our character defects are removed, we can grow in that image. It's like if there's a carton full of milk and you want to change it and have water in it, well, first you have to get rid of the milk, right? And rinse it out. Then you could put the water in it. Otherwise, the water is going to be just kind of milky and yucky. So this is we get our defects of character removed so that God can fill them with good stuff. And we help him, not that God needs help, but he's assigned our job is to practice the opposite as best we can. And then they say, okay, people dispute, is God really willing and able to remove our defects of character? And then this, the last paragraph on page 63. Someone, a recovered alcoholic says, yeah, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, clergymen got me nowhere. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house and then asked a higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. Okay, there is so much in that paragraph. So he's saying, I couldn't stop drinking and no human being could do the job for me, right? Powerless. But he doesn't say, when I put down the food for a certain amount of time, says, when I became willing to clean house. So basically willing to work these steps and then asked a higher power. And here's how they define higher power. We are not free to give that word any meaning we want, such as group, doorknob, anything like that. God as I understand him. So it's God, but I'm allowed to have my own conception of God. We asked a higher power, God as I understand him, to give me release. My obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out. So it's like we become willing and we ask God Now, God knows our hearts, obviously, right? But the mechanism he set in place for removing defects, for removing the food obsession, is that we ask, right? He doesn't want to read our mind. He wants us to ask. Now, why? If I were God, maybe I would have said, when I create people, I'm just going to read their minds and whatever they want, I'm going to do. But God's way smarter than I am. And he said, we have to ask. We have to ask. But remember, ask, and then the person is also willing to clean house. So this person is willing to go to any length. So that assumes this person right away is going to start doing the work of these steps to clear away the wreckage of his or her past, to start being honest, to start practicing spiritual principles. And then what does he say? As soon as I did this, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. Bill Wilson talks about that, right? In Bill's story, he says, the minute I made up my mind to go through with this program, I had the curious feeling that my alcohol problem would be removed, which in fact it was, right? And that was my experience too. I had gone to a meeting. I had binged right before the meeting, right before the meeting. I was at the meeting and it was a meeting that allowed questions. And I just said basically something like, I can't stop. And afterwards, I got a sponsor and I purposely picked a sponsor who I knew was like the toughest person there who would let me get away with nothing. And when I was asked, what are you willing to do? I said, anything you tell me. And this meeting was an hour and a half from where I lived. And I remember thinking, I hope I'm not told to like get up and move an hour and a half away because I'll just have to do it. But I was not told that. But what I was told was that I had to stop lying right away. And, a bunch of other things. And I agreed. And I went out in the parking lot and I said, God, I'm willing to admit everything I've thought about you is wrong and start over and let you show me what you're like and how to worship you. I didn't realize that I was basically doing a third step. And I had the same experience that this guy had, that Bill Wilson had, that thousands of people had. My obsession to compulsively eat vanished. It was lifted right out of me. So we submit, we ask, and then we just start doing what we think God would want us to do as best we can. On page 64, it says, in AA meetings and OA meetings all over the world, statements like this are heard all the time. And they say, but how come we're granted a perfect release from alcoholism or the food obsession? How come by the same means we don't get a perfect release from all our other difficulties or defects? And they say, this is the riddle of our existence, the full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least part of the answer is apparent to us. I mean, I know that I started really working this program that night when I surrendered was over 40 years ago. And some of my character defects are pretty much removed, such as dishonesty. I don't lie at all anymore. If I were to tell a lie, I would feel sick to my stomach. I couldn't do it. But I still have pride. I still have sloth. There's still, plenty of other character defects I have. And how come? I think some things we can stop on our own. For instance, my sponsor told me that night when I said I'll do anything, the first lie you tell, we're done. I mean, that's a pretty hard, that's a pretty hard line. No lies at all, not try to stop lying. And I said, okay. And I stopped lying right away. Every now and then at the beginning, I'd catch myself saying something untrue and I would say, wait, what I just said was not true. And I would fix it. Some things we can do by willpower. We can stop lying. We can stop stealing. And we can stop gossiping. Those things we can do right away on our own willpower. Those are actions I take. But to stop having pride, well, that God's got to change my heart, right? To stop having fear, God's got to change my heart. So there are actions we take, and we don't sit around and say, well, God's just working on my dishonesty, and I'm just like waiting for him to remove the defect. No, we can start being honest right away. But they say, okay, when people pour so much alcohol into themselves, so much food, they commit an unnatural act because it defies our instinctive desire for self-preservation. And it says, we are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol or by food. And then the grace of God can enter and expel their obsession, right? If you were like I was or you are now, then it's like being beaten, right? The big book says we are beaten into a state of reasonableness, a state of desperation, a state where we are willing to say, I will do anything. And that was me. I told you my sponsor told me no lying. I was also told I was not allowed to keep food at my house except for like spices and oil. I had to every day buy just as much as I would need for that day and go to my food sponsor's house and show her what I was eating. Now, I mean, I lived across the street from a bakery in New York City. You know, you can get food 24/7 within 5 minutes. Um, but I said, okay. And I just got all food out of my house and I would buy just what I needed for the day. And I would walk to my food sponsor's house because my sponsor lived an hour and a half from me. So obviously couldn't walk there. Go to my food sponsor's house. And then it was 3 subway rides and a walk to get to my office. And in my office, I traveled New York City. So I was on the subway all the time. So it's like my food for the day might be a can of green beans, which I carry with a can opener in my backpack, right? I was humbled by the terrific beating administered by food, and I was desperate. So, of course, the grace of God could come in. But they say most of our difficulties don't fall into that category. Every normal person wants to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in the society of his fellows, and wants to be safe and secure. God made us that way. So when we say, like, you know, it's like for if a woman who says, I want to get married, there's nothing wrong with that. God, like, put that desire in us. But when that desire becomes a demand, that's when we have trouble. It says, God made us this way. We want to be safe, right? Like we're not supposed to be crossing streets with our eyes closed and say, you know, it's okay. I have no desire to be safe. I'll just let God take care of me. Like, you know, right? The book says God gave us brains to use. We have these things. It says God didn't design man to destroy himself by alcohol, by food, but he did give us instincts to help us stay alive. On top of page 65, it is nowhere evidence, at least in this life, we don't know what happens in heaven, that our Creator expects us to fully eliminate our instinctual drives. So far as we know, nowhere on the record, God completely removed from any human being all his natural drives. So my drive that I had to lie, I lied all the time. I made up like stories about me being mugged to get attention. I just lied about everything. That's not an instinctual drive. So God doesn't remove our instinctual drives fully, but it says most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires. So it's like our desires are in hyperdrive and we let them far exceed their intended purpose. So it says, one, they drive us blindly. You know, it's like someone who, you know, wants to get married and then just goes out and dates and dates and dates, even people who are totally inappropriate because they're so afraid of not getting married. Or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfaction or pleasure than are possible or due us, right? To say, I need to have enough money that I'm never afraid. And then people can sometimes, it's like no matter how much money we get, it's not enough. It says, no, no. When we demand they supply us with more satisfaction or pleasure that's possible or that's due us. So that's interesting to think. What is due me? And pretty much nothing. Now, there's some basic things like for security. I think it's due me or I'm entitled to expect that like my husband doesn't cheat on me, you know, things like that. That's a realistic expectation. But to think that I'm due a lot, Then I go into the defect of entitlement, that I'm due perfect health, that I'm due a certain amount of money, that I'm due or entitled to have children who listen to me and adopt my values. I'm not. And it says, to the extent that we depart from the degree of perfection God wishes us here on earth, which is to say, God, thank you for what you've given me. That's the measure of our character defects or our sins. They use the word interchangeably. It's just departing from God's will. That's all it is. A character defect is departing from God's will. They say, if we ask, God will certainly forgive our dereliction. See, there it is, the condition to be forgiven. All we have to do is ask. It's so easy. Like, God is so nice. It's like, God, please forgive me for being unkind to this person. And I fixed it with that person. And God's like, okay, I forgive you. That's it. It's so easy, but how often do we just not do it? It says, but in no case will he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. So how do I cooperate? I have to practice the opposite. So again, if I take $50 from someone, the way I would cooperate would be giving that $50 back and telling the person, I'm really sorry, right? If I've been unkind, it's to fix it. Um, for me, one of my biggest character defects, I hate to admit, is like sloth. I could just like lie on my couch all day and read a book. But I'm married. I have a house that won't clean itself. And yes, even though I have someone to clean my house, there are still, unfortunately, things that you pretty much have to do every day to keep up with a house. Well, I have to be willing to work for that, to do that. And it says, God asks only that we try as best we know how to make progress in the building of character. That's it. We just have to do our best. I am never going to be 100% humble in this lifetime, I don't think. I'm more humble than I was when I started, but the more I do this, the more I see I have a long way to go. It says, so step 6, entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. We make a beginning. So here's a good thing that we can do. And I often have my sponsees do this either at step 6 or at step 12 when it says we practice these principles in all our affairs. Say, list your 2 biggest character defects. Then write how these defects manifest themselves. Like pride may be, oh, I find myself at work talking about how bad so and so is. And that's my pride thinking I'm better. I find myself thinking that everyone who doesn't do OA the way I do it is doing it wrong. So whatever it might be, I'd make a list and then I would look, how can I practice the opposite? So it might be that at work, if I've been prideful about, person A, I will make a point of saying good things about person A. I remember when I started graduate school and I thought, I've got a lot to say, want to answer all the questions. So I decided I'm only going to raise my hand 1 time per class. So we look at how our defect manifests itself and then how we can practice the opposite. Very concrete things. Now, I would say, if you're like me and you have like 50 character defects, we cannot do that for 50 character defects. We will be totally overwhelmed. So I would say take 2 at a time. And when we feel we've made good progress on those 2, then we could take 2 more. And we start with the 2 that are hardest, which might be dishonesty, pride, fear, things like that. Okay, so it says, if we ask, God will forgive us. But we don't expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink or the drive to eat was. A few of them may be. For me, dishonesty was pretty much removed, that it became automatic for me to be honest. But with most of them, unfortunately, the unfortunately is my editorial, We shall have to be content with patient improvement. Am I getting better? So, does that mean if I have a resentment, instead of it lasting for 3 days, is it lasting for two and then one? And then, oh, can I resolve most resentments within an hour? If I have, fear, am I resolving my fear more quickly? Basically, we should always be seeing improvement. And we have to be patient with us, patient with it. And on page 66, it says, no matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. So we need to be on the lookout for that. So it's like, okay, am I so greedy that I'm not giving money to charity? Like, oh, do I have that desire? Am I so whatever that I'm not doing whatever? So we want to look at that. Like, what defects do we have? What desires do we have that oppose the grace of God? And it says, okay, you may dispute this, but let's think about this a little more. Well, everybody, even like normal people, want to be rid of their most glaring and destructive handicaps. No one wants to be so prideful that people say, oh, you're a braggart. And no one wants their greed to go so far that they're labeled a thief. No one wants to be so angry that they kill the person they're angry about, have lust so strong that they rape people, and they use the word gluttonous enough to ruin their health. No one wants to be so slothful that they're paralyzed by it, or so envious that it creates agony. They say, okay, most people don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. So if we don't have them, right, if we're not greedy enough to steal or angry enough to murder, we're ready to like pat ourselves on the back. And they're saying, yeah, don't do it. Because generally it's self-interest that has enabled us to escape. There's no spiritual effort involved in avoiding excesses, which will bring us punishment anyway. If I see like a beautiful piece of jewelry that I want, but I can't afford it, well, if the reason that I don't steal it is because, what this jewelry store has alarms and there's no way I'm going to be able to steal it without getting caught, there's no spiritual goodness in me in that. But if I say, first level, I'm not going to steal it because it's just wrong, because the owner of the jewelry store would be out money and that's not a nice way to be. That's good. But a better way is to say, I don't want to be a person who craves things that I can't have. So that's an even better way to be. So it says, where do we stand when we look at the less violent aspects of our defects? That we exult in and I think rationalize our defects. And sometimes we really love them. So, pride. Who doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next person, or even quite a lot superior, right? How about people who don't do OA right, and right being defined as the way we do it? Or even religion. I mean, if anyone practices a religion or practices like non-religion, everyone thinks the way they're doing it is right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So, what are we doing? Like looking down on people who practice religion or don't practice it a different way than we do? That's pride. And what about when I love this, let greed masquerade as ambition? Well, I'm just ambitious. Am I even supposed to be ambitious, right? Like, we have to look, is it just because I want more money than I really need? And how do we practice the opposite? I think it's just, remember, our big book says love and tolerance is our code. I've changed my mind, in my opinion, on so many things that I was sure I was right about. And we have to realize the things we, feel so sure we're right about now, maybe we're not right about. Of course, like believing that God exists. Yes, I can say if we believe that, we're right about that. But we have to be really careful. And pride to like feel superior to the next fellow. Well, maybe the way we can practice the opposite is doing things to let the next fellow feel good about himself or herself. So, a number of years ago, I took CrossFit. I'm not a very good athlete. And in CrossFit, they do this thing. So, let's say there's 10 people in the class. They have this board. And at the end of the class, they like look at everyone's score and they rank you in order, like person number one, their score was this, all the way down to person number 10. And I was often person number 10. And then I thought, you know what? Better me than someone else because I don't get my self-esteem based on how well I did on a CrossFit class. Otherwise, like I'd be in therapy for years because I'm a terrible athlete. And I'm like, let me be the worst. It's okay. Let someone else be number nine instead of number 10. I don't have to be the best. I don't have to be seen as the smartest, as the prettiest, as the person with the nicest clothes. I don't have to be seen as anything. I only need to be seen by God as a person, not the person, as a person who's trying to do his will as best I can. That's it. I don't need to be seen anything by someone else. Page 67, they continue on. How many people speak about love with their lips and believe it, but they're really hiding lust in a dark corner of their mind, right? They're saying it's love because then they can go ahead and have sex, but it's really not love, it's just lust. And they also say self-righteous anger is very enjoyable. People can take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, right? Like to say, oh, this person annoys me because it brings a feeling of superiority. We are not supposed to have self-righteous anger. And sometimes that's a hard one. Recently, there was someone who deeply hurt one of my children, really hurt one of my children. And I was angry. I was angry. And I saw, I cannot be. And was it righteous anger? I mean, I think, yeah, this person really did something rotten to one of my kids. But I had read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read it. So if anyone has seen it, please let me know. Like, we are people who are unable to handle righteous anger. We leave it to those who are better able to handle it than ourselves. So we can't have that. So what did I do? In the big book, in that story, again, I always forget the name, but it's the story where it has the prayer we pray every day for the person we're angry at. And so I didn't even, this is like, I think the first time in my life, I didn't even want to pray that prayer for someone. And finally, after wrestling with it, I made myself say the prayer. And you have to pray for everything you want for yourself, even if you don't mean it. And I specifically prayed for something I knew this person wanted, even though I hoped they wouldn't get it. I made myself pray it because I am someone who cannot have self-righteous anger. What happened at the end of those 2 weeks? My feelings became neutral. There was no more energy. Do I love this person? No. But I was able to pray without feeling, dear God, I'm saying this, but I really don't mean it. I was able to just, it's like God took the electric charge out of my anger. It's up to God and people who don't have this illness to deal with this. Me and people who have this illness are not entitled to be self-righteous. It destroys us, right? It's almost like if you think about food, normal people may be able to have that sugary dessert, on Thanksgiving and, binge on Thanksgiving and go back the next day to being normal. I don't have that luxury. I don't. And I don't have the luxury to self-righteous anger. So whether other people can or not, whether like my husband can afford to be angry at this person who hurt our child, that's between him and God. But I know I can't. I can't have self-righteous anger. Then they go ahead and they say, gossiped, barbed with our anger, is a polite form of murder by character assassination. So before we we go and talk badly about someone else, remember, we are murdering them by character assassination. And they say, yeah, we're not trying to help those we criticize. We're trying to proclaim our own righteousness. Otherwise, why would I talk about that person? And here's some other ways we do it in a sneaky way. Say, oh, so and so needs your prayers. She's cheating on her husband. No, we don't do that. We are very careful about talking badly about someone. And then they talk about gluttony, but again, remember, they're talking to alcoholics here. So for us, we're not going to call it gluttony because compulsive eating, I believe for us, is an actual disease that requires a solution, a treatment, which is what the 12 steps are. It says, we live in a world riddled with envy. To a greater or less degree, everyone is infected with it. I love that word infected. Like if we have an infection, we need a remedy, right? And what's the remedy for envy? And I think it's to do something nice for the person we're envious of. If I'm jealous of someone, I can make a point of doing something extra nice for that person. And envy is, when we think about it, it's really a slap in the face to God because it's saying, God, the way you've distributed gifts is incorrect. I was supposed to get more. An antidote to that is gratitude, being grateful for what I have. Because when I really practice that, like if I'm envious, like, oh, why did this bad thing happen to me? And, this person gets things good. And I think, why did bad things happen to me? Like, gosh, I live in a country with freedom. I'm not blind. I'm not crippled. I have air conditioning in the summer, heat in the winter, enough food that my family isn't starving. Yeah, God, you are really unfair. You've given me way more than I deserve. So it says we have to look at our envy. It says we spend too much time wishing for what we don't have instead of working for it, or getting angry looking for attributes we shall never have instead of adjusting to the fact and accepting it. Attributes we shall never have. That may be something about our looks, something about our health, right? It's like, why do I have diabetes? I'm not overweight. I eat healthy. I exercise, but it's like, okay, my parents were diabetics. This was the hand that I was dealt. So I just have to like adjust to it and move on. And it says, how often do we work hard with no better motive than to be secure and slothful later on? But we call that retiring. And I just read something by E. Stanley Jones. He was a guy that the founders of AA studied, and I meant to bring it in. He talks about retiring, like when we get older, how to never really get old. And one of the main things, it was find interests, things that interest you to do. Even if it's not your old job, find something new and try to learn something new every day. Learning new by like spiritual reading, learning something new. I think like physically, like learning to use our bodies in a new way, but not just retiring and saying, okay, I've worked hard. Now I get to be slothful the rest of my life. No, Michelangelo kept working, I believe, until his death at like age 90. So we keep going. And it says, consider too our talent for procrastination, which is really sloth in 5 syllables. Oh, that one gets me in the heart. I give myself a certain amount of cleaning I have to do every day. And some days it's like, gosh, I just forgot to do it. I didn't get around to it. So I have to fight against that. So this morning it's like early on, got it done. No procrastination for us if it's sloth. And it says we all have a list of defects like this. So it says, okay, page 68. Some people say, yeah, I'm willing to have all these defects removed. But when we look closely, we can all construct a list of milder defects that sometimes we want to hang on to them. So it's like, are we really aiming for spiritual and moral perfection or just as much as we can get by with? And they say, many people will say, well, how can we accept the entire implication of step six? Why, that's perfection. And they're saying, no, it's not really a hard question. Step one, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol or for us food, well, that can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps are perfect ideals. They're goals and they're the measuring sticks. So, for instance, honesty, right? The goal, the measuring stick is 100% honesty. But what if, I fudge something or tell a lie? Okay, so I've moved away from that and I have to fix it, confess it to God, myself, another human being, make amends if I have to, and then I move back. With some things like pride, think, well, the absolute 100% yardstick is to be 100% humble. I don't know anyone who is 100% humble. But I look and when I do my review, I think, okay, was there any way I was prideful? And maybe every time I ask God to forgive me, I move a little bit closer, right? So that's all we do. We have our yardsticks, our measuring stick, and we just want to keep moving closer. So it says the steps state perfect ideals, the goals toward which we look, and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. Step six is still difficult, but not impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and we keep trying. And at the bottom of page 68, it says, okay, let's look at the defects we're unwilling to give up. We have to erase the hard and fast lines we've drawn. We can't say, I will never give this up. Why would I not be willing? Well, if I'm not willing to give up, let's say, the defect of vengefulness, it's because I am hoping that something bad is going to happen to this person, right? Either life is going to get them back, or after they die, God is going to get them back. And that's a defect I have to be willing to give up. It's like, God, please remove this defect of vengefulness, of mean-spirited from me. And they go ahead and they say, I'll head toward perfection, but I'm not going to hurry. I'm going to postpone dealing with some of my bigger problems indefinitely. And they say, no, that won't do. The moment we say never, our minds close against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. So they're telling me I need to, when I do step six, and if I'm through the steps, really every night when I do my step 10, look at what yardsticks are there, like what are my main character defects, and how have I been? Have I moved further away? Have I done something wrong that I need to ask God to forgive me more? And it says, when we stop delaying, we move toward God's will for us and move toward what I think it says at the beginning of this chapter. Move toward someone who is growing in the image and likeness of his own creator. And isn't that the purpose of doing all this work anyway? And that is all I have.